I've just been rummaging in our cellar because Halloween's coming up and I really love that. We tend to do all sorts of things in our garden. We decorate it up and we put smoke, and we've got all sorts of amazing things that we've accumulated over the years. Obviously, you keep them in the cellar, so that's why I'm down here having a rummage through, and I'm thinking, how I'm going to display it this year. And quite often I also bring that sort of feel into the house too, and I decorate the house, and then we video it and we send it off, to our family and what have you. So I really do enjoy the theatrical side and the side now that is for the children, so they can get dressed up. They come to the house, and we get lots and lots of families that actually come to our house on Halloween. I think possibly because they know that we're going to do a display. So I just thought, as I was doing this, let's have a chat about Halloween. If we look at Halloween, it's normally about those, the witches and all of the almost the commercial side of it. But I thought I'd like to talk about something different today. And I want to just think about witches and think about them as people. And I thought I'd do some referencing, which I have. I love the referencing, as you know. And I thought I'd just talk about the people as people, because a lot of those wonderful ladies who were accused of witchcraft were actually amazing healers and carers and midwives and all sorts of lovely community-minded people. So anyway, let's sort of set the scene, shall we put it that way? And imagine, obviously we're in October, but imagine a cold October night. The kind that seems to stretch on forever. You know what it's like. We get dark at 3:00, don't we, really? And imagine that you're walking through the village in Lancashire, and somewhere out there in the dark, you can see the outline of Pendle Hill. Now, I've been past there, and literally in sort of evening darkness, and yes, you can see it, and yes, it does look rather sinister. But if you're from around Pendle, you'll know the name Pendle, and it's part of the local language. It's part of a legend. But what's interesting is this. 400 years later, people are still talking about the witches, aren't they? They still walk the hills. They still leave flowers. And I can't help wondering, were these really witches, or just, like I thought before, just people in the wrong place at the wrong time? So today, I thought we'd not go into the commercial side of the broomsticks and the sweets and the bubbling cauldrons and stuff like that. Of course, I love all of that, but I just want to look for something far more human. The fear and the grief and the hope and the power that comes from being different. Imagine a world without science as we know it. No real medicine, no internet, no easy answers. And the year is 1612. And there's a lovely young woman called Alison Device, and she's walking down a country lane, and she crosses paths with a travelling peddler. And she asks him for a few pins. He refuses, and she mutters something under her breath. Maybe a curse, maybe she swore at him. Of course, we call swearing cursing, don't we? But maybe she was just really frustrated because all she wanted was just a few pins, even maybe pins that were slightly bent or whatever that the peddler couldn't sell anyway. Anyway, a few days later, apparently, this man collapses, and then people say he's been bewitched. Now, if you saw, or let's say, if you or I saw that today, we'd call it coincidence, wouldn't we, that this peddler became ill, not because of anything to do with passing a young woman who asked him for charity, really. But back then, that was all it took to light the fuse. Within months, 10 people were accused of witchcraft. Mothers, daughters, neighbours, all caught up in something much bigger than themselves. They were poor, and being poor meant they were visible. You begged, you borrowed, you were in people's debt. And debts have a way of turning into accusations, don't they? The trials at Lancaster Castle read like something out of a nightmare. Children were testifying against their parents. Words were twisted into evidence, and all of it fueled by a kind of collective fear. You know the type, the kind that spreads faster than truth, where people started to gossip. And when I visited Pendle, myself, literally, the hill was shrouded in mist, and it did look really, really spooky. And you can see the outline of the old prison wall and the gallows hill in the distance. And I remember thinking, what did those women feel as they looked up at that same sky? Did they know they were about to become ghosts in our history? And then we have another one, which I found when I was referencing a lady called Agnes Sampson. And she was known as the wise wife of Keith. So let's move north. We're going to Scotland now. And this is late 1500s. And there was a woman named Agnes Sampson. And she was a respected midwife. She was a herbalist, someone you might go for help when your baby was sick, or maybe, if your crops were failing, or you just didn't feel well. But then a royal ship gets caught in a violent storm, totally away from where she lived. King James VI is on board and nearly drowns, and he decides witches must have conjured up the wind. Within weeks, he sent out a whole load of stuff that said, go all over England, seek out these women, round them all up, because we need to torture them and question them, because I could have lost my life. So within weeks, hundreds of women were rounded up, and they were tortured, and they were questioned, and Agnes was one of them. They shaved her head. They, literally, they were looking for some form of a devil's mark. I don't know what that would be, but they were looking for that and some sign that she'd made a pact with evil. And yet, even under that kind of horror, she stays calm, rational. It's said she even spoke to the king, trying to reason with him, but reason isn't what anyone was looking for when they already had made up their minds. And bless her, she was executed. And her story becomes just one among thousands of women who were caught up, thousands of young children, female children, sometimes men, yes, but generally women. And I can't help but ask, what did she really believe? Was she a healer? Who saw herself as working with nature? Or did she truly think there were forces beyond her control, moving through her hands? We'll never know, but her name lives on, and some say her spirit still lingers in Holyrood Palace. Not haunting, just watching, being aware of people noticing that they were being observed, just waiting to be understood maybe. And then we come to Helen Duncan. Now, I know all about Helen Duncan because she was a medium. And I actually had an old client way back in the 80s who had actually been to her séance just after the Second World War or around that in 1944. And I had her witness firsthand. And she told me what had happened, and she thought it was absolutely amazing. And all of that information she then donated to Ardfinny College. So anyway, this one's our final witch story, if we can call her that. Obviously, I didn't think she was a witch. I would say she was an amazing medium. But she was actually trialed as a witch. So anyway, let's get into the story. So it brings us up to the modern world. The year is 1944, and the world's at war. And in a small flat in Portsmouth, a woman called Helen Duncan is conducting a séance. Now, she used to do this regularly, and she had all sorts of people coming, and they were having amazing evidence. Now, she's a medium. She's someone who claims to speak to the dead. And the families who came to her aren't looking for magic. They were looking for comfort. It was during Second World War. So people had lost so many of their sons and their fathers and their uncles out there. So they were looking for comfort, a message, a sign, anything to say their loved ones are still there. But one night she reveals something she shouldn't have known. That a Royal Navy ship, HMS Barnum, had been sunk. The government hadn't yet released that news, so how could she know? The police raided her séance. She's arrested under the Witchcraft Act of 1735, and this was 1944. Yes, that's an old law, but it still existed, and she was sent to prison. And think about that for a second. In an age of radar and tanks and telephones, Britain still had laws against witchcraft. That's crazy. And Helen Duncan, this wonderful lady, became the last person in our country to be tried as a witch. Was she a fraud, a psychic, or someone caught in the crossfire between faith and fear? Maybe in a strange way, she was all of that. And maybe more. And maybe in a strange way, that's what brought her into the newspapers and everything else. People started to wonder and people started to question about mediumship. So, what connects these stories, Pendle, Agnes Sampson, Helen Duncan, is how thin the line is between belief and fear, and how quickly we turn mystery into a threat. I keep thinking about that word witch, and I'm sure I was a witch back then many times. I'm sure a lot of you listening to this would have been labelled as a witch. It carries so much weight for so long, but when you strip away the folklore, the flames, the broomsticks, you find ordinary, caring people, mostly women, mostly poor, and mostly so brave and courageous to do that. And maybe what frightened everyone wasn't their power, but their independence, their knowledge of Mother Earth, of the herbs, of how to cure. The idea that somebody could hold power that didn't come from church or the crown or a man. So were witches truly bad? Or were they just the first people brave enough to live differently? Tonight, as you walk through your own town, look around. Whose stories are still being misunderstood by us? Who do we still call other because we don't understand what they know? And thank you for listening to my little story there. But remember that every legend begins with someone who dared to be different. And maybe we could have these 10 questions. I like questions, don't I? To leave you with. And how about this? How about what makes someone a witch? Was it power, fear, or just perception? Or number 2, would I have believed the rumours if I lived back then? And I don't think I would believe the rumours. I think I probably would have been a witch myself. Number 3, how many innocent people were punished simply for standing out? And we know that so many were. Number 4, do we still hunt witches today, just under a different name? Number 5, why does society always need someone to blame when we're afraid? And that's really true, isn't it? Number 6, if I saw something strange that I couldn't explain, what would I really believe? well, to be honest, I'd be right in there. I'd be asking questions, or I'd be taking photographs, or I'd be doing something. I'd be getting a lot of information about it because I'd be really, really curious. Number 7, are magic and faith really that different? Or are they just different names for the same thing? Number 8, could someone like Helen Duncan exist today, and would we treat her any better? Well, we know there are a lot of women like Helen Duncan, perhaps not as good as her, but those that do healing and those that can get information that is not physically tangent, that isn't literally something that somebody could say, right, I'll reference that and I'll prove that. Number 9, why do these old stories still hold power over us? And 10, finally, do you think witches were ever real? Or are they just mirrors for our own fears? I'll leave you with that one. Thank you so much for joining me today. This podcast is free to listen to, and if you'd like to help me keep creating it, you can support the show through my Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Every bit of support means the world. And if you'd like to go deeper into your own journey, come and visit me at margaretdepetro.com. You'll find ways to book tarot readings with me, courses, Reiki and healing appointments, meditations, and lots more waiting for you there. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep walking your own beautiful path.